What happened at work that made everyone quit at once? I worked at a bread manufacturing plant. This happened in the bagging area. A worker tripped and somehow the way he landed his hand slipped underneath the machine guard and into a chain. Cut off his arm just below the elbow. The supervisor insisted we just wipe off the machine with a towel and continue running the rest of the already baked product. 12 out of 16 including myself quit. I found out later the manager fired that supervisor that day. 3 of us, the engineers, quit the same week and without any discussion between ourselves. Man in charge was an insufferable, insulting twat. This led to the head office losing faith and the whole subsidiary being sold off. Company did a survey of employee happiness. It had super limited answers. We filled it out and tried to explain that, internally, our team was doing well and we were happy, but just about everyone had problems with 2 other employees outside the team who were bullies in important positions. The company asked us instead what we could do better so the bullies don't bully. Over half the team quit within a month, which is unheard of at that company, and our team was slashed as a cornerstone of the entire business. Manager kept pitching Amway to us on breaks and then cut hours of those that didn't sign up under him. We worked in retail at the mall. Worked in a call center offering free public transport brochures to people living in a city. The place was poorly managed, it was contracted out by the local government and only cared about numbers. Early during one shift, a spate of bombings on public transport killed a load of people around the city. After a few calls of getting abuse from people against we were trying to get their details to send them bus/train timetables etc., we collectively stopped making calls. We assumed management would pause the project for that week at least, maybe longer, out of respect for what had happened. Our manager put her foot down and told us we must continue calling that morning, and as we were only on temporary contracts, anyone who refused may face being replaced. Then she stormed off. The entire team quit on the spot. We just got up and left without speaking to her again. We called up the work agency to let them know and they did not blame us. We were all replaced, but the local government office heard what had happened and pulled the plug on the contract with that call center within a month. Not my work, but close friends. Restaurant owner wasn't paying his staff and checks kept bouncing. So one night, they all said fuck this, closed up shop together and left. Owner got ran out of town after social media and reg media took over. He closed down both of his places. The second also had a staff walk out the week prior to the first, and sold the buildings. Edit, since people keep asking. This was in MD. And the second place was his second restaurant, Indian Place, that had kitchen staff walk out a week prior, but the walkout didn't close the restaurant. He closed it and sold it after his first restaurant was shuttered. Good riddance. One of my first jobs was as a dishwasher at a local steakhouse, which was always really busy as it overlooked the waterfalls of the local river. My 3rd or 4th day working, the whole kitchen staff just didn't show up. Except for me. Boss grabbed me and taught me how to cook as we went. Not only had I never cooked before, this was a Friday night and I was missing a concert, so I was kind of angry about that. Probably not the culinary experience some of the customers expected that night, but I tried my best. Then, after we closed, I had to stick around for another 4 hours to wash dishes. Turns out everybody went to the concert. This was almost 40 years ago. Still mad. I worked at a KFC in the 80s. We had a really cool manager. I was assistant manager along with another, and lots of other great young people worked there. Our manager was hired to turn around the store and he was given a budget to buy new equipment. He also saved money on paper products and got the store really clean with our help. At the end of the year, he was fired by the upper management for spending too much. They then brought in a new manager who immediately set about giving us all a hard time. Everyone walked. The store had to shut down for several days and the new guy brought in his family to help run it. The store shut down permanently a few years later. The district manager offered me a job in management, but I just didn't trust them at that point. Worked at Dairy Queen. Someone was stealing money regularly during the closing shift. Many of us had a suspicion of who it was and I'm pretty sure most of us told our manager for fear of being blamed ourselves. We were certain it was the assistant manager who was with us on those closing shifts. Instead, our manager started randomly firing younger staff members for any minor discretion and blaming the missing money on them. When they fired me, it was the last straw and several of my coworkers walked out in solidarity. News flash, it was the assistant manager all along. I ended up threatening to go to the labor board and they kind of paid me off. Edit, this was about 15 years ago, I'm very much over it. It was my first real job in high school and I was there for almost 2 years. I'm Canadian. It was in DQ in Ontario, and my boss knew she was in for a world of trouble if I disclosed some of their practices. I did not sign an NDA. I think my manager was afraid to let anything get to a higher level. They added like 1K to my final paycheck that had no real explanation why it was there. In all honesty, it could have been that I was young and didn't quite understand how loose ends get tied up after someone is fired. Maybe their version of severance, I really don't know. That's just how my 17-year-old brain made sense of it at the time. Anyways, I see that assistant manager out and about all the time, and after all this time she still can't look in my direction. I worked at a bakery a while back, and while enjoyable at times, it was generally a nightmare. There was one highlight though, and that was our second manager. We had 3 managers, and the first and third were okay, but they never really motivated people and at times could be very rude. Our second manager, however, was amazing. She was always encouraging, kind, understanding, and I never heard her get angry. She was the type of person who was meant to be a leader, and she did her job well. Too well. Corporate decided to transfer her to another location since that one was failing, and pretty much everyone quit the moment we found out she was leaving. She was the glue that held us together, and I still remember her as one of the best bosses I've ever had. Worked at a chain pizza place. The manager didn't approve of how well we cleaned and prepped for the next day. So we all came into a note saying something to the effect of "You are all replaceable," so we all said okay, took off the uniform and left. We didn't even lock up or close up shop. Just walked off. Phones were ringing for orders, there were people coming into the dining area, but nobody was there working. Once she realized nobody was there, she was calling everyone, going nuts, telling us to come to work or we're fired. One person went back and tried to save it. I just reminded her that I was replaceable, and so was the person who signed my check, then hung up. They had to close for about a week or 2 to replace the staff. The location completely closed and filed bankruptcy less than a year later, at least partly due to her leadership. The location is a Verizon store now. Several. A doctor I had, she was known for hiking up her prices and was a cunt to her employees. What made them quit was when she misdiagnosed a patient so he'd pay her more. Her lawyer daddy couldn't help her and his offices were closed down and became 7-Eleven. First job I had, I was 15. The owner believed he could muscle on everyone and they'd listen to him. His son was the manager and would threaten violence every minute. We had a bad snowstorm, and when none of us could come in, the owner threatened to shoot us all in front of our parents. We quit and called the cops on him. While he got off with a slap, his businesses went down. One was even burned, and he was accused of doing it himself for insurance. His son tried to find any job he could, but he was basically blacklisted. Had a colleague who was known for her debts and her businesses not lasting. SH had one business that was doing well because she uninvolved. Until she thought she could increase her profits. It was a restaurant and was also a rest stop, so it got a lot of customers. Then she changed the ingredients, went cheaper, and it was noticed. After 6 months everyone quit and it became nothing more than a place people shat and peed at. Smallish company with a very necessary programming team of 5 people. CEO spent several $100,000 repainting and refurbishing the building, deciding he didn't like the color, and got it redone in the same month. Then lockdown hit and the company was suddenly struggling for money. CEO decided to retrench 2 of our team members. At first we thought that he picked those 2 because they were less familiar with the systems. But then the other 3 of us were told by the CEO that those 2 were in the most rough positions financially, and one was expecting another kid in a few weeks. And that this meant that they could hire them back as contractors for cheap because they'd be desperate. In the next week the 3 of us chatted among ourselves, all resigned, and they had to keep the other 2 devs on with their standard paycheck for longer, all while looking for new places to work. Worked at a cheap clothing retail store while I was in college. 15 to 20 hours/week for the first several months, as was most of the staff. Then we got a new manager who decided that the state mandated paid breaks, 15 minutes after 4 hours, were a waste of money. So he changed everyone's shifts to 3 hours 45 minutes or less so no one would get a paid break. Then people complained, so he hired a bunch of new people and reduced the old staff to about 1 shift a week. Lost pretty much everyone who actually knew what they were doing in less than a month. I heard most of the new people also quit pretty quickly, once they figured out how dumbly the place was run. When the managers said they could train monkeys to do the job. So all the staff retired. And they had to halt operations until they hired 2 staff to be on call all the time. Guess how long that lasted? Business largely worked, because the owner trusted his employees to do a good job. So the employees did a good job. The business was doing really well, and the owner assumed it was all because of him. So he started micromanaging everyone's job. People started dropping off like flies, because the working conditions became intolerable. The company didn't last very long after that. Thank you for watching Reddit Stories. May you and your loved ones have a blessed day.